Welcome to the Combo Wombo. I am Mister Gimpy, and over here on the other side we have Chipped Monk. What's up, bro?
What's happening, brother? I'm just out here kicking it, living.
Just living the dream over there, man. It looks
Yeah,
looks like we're this is one of those weird ones because we had a holiday for
we
just
took a day
recently.
off. You're like,
Yeah,
hey man, should we do it this day? And I'm like, no, let's like take it, like relax.
yeah.
Why wake up early and like put all, like I feel like our podcast is growing, but we did the smart thing. I feel ahead of time where we got like 3 or 4 episodes in the chamber.
Yeah.
So like no matter what happens, like if one of us gets sick or something, like it'll be continuous no matter what. Hopefully, like I know like it's like we're one vacation away from absolute
From this,
disaster,
this
but yeah,
yeah,
man.
yeah,
So we're
yeah.
like in the middle of the week. I've been drinking. You've been smoking. We've been kicking it. Old school. You've been
Right, for
smoking that
sure.
loud, that yayo.
For sure, for sure. No, man, the only thing I got is that H2O today, man. But I gotta say,
Just drinking that lean.
after episode 10, man, I
Is that the
feel
old vodka in the water bottle trick?
that old chestnut. Nah.
Yeah, the old Duggins.
What
Like,
was
you know
it?
what? If you put a little vodka in this water bottle, nobody will know the difference if I go into this stadium.
No, Grandpa, it's fine. No, I was looking at some of the older videos that we had, and Heart on the
Absolute
Table.
treasures.
Heart on the Table
Bangers.
straight up said, "There's a combo wombo bingo card, baby," for all of the shit we usually do,
Yeah,
man.
I was just asking you about. I was like, yeah, did you see the Cabo Wabo Beagle card? You're like, yes, I have.
Yeah, dude, I straight printed that
Pull
shit
it out
out.
again,
I'm
dude.
about
Like,
to frame that shit, dude. Like,
that's
like they got
absolutely.
like Ninja Gaiden reference, which we'll probably cross it off today.
Yeah, at some point.
Chip
Team Ninja or
saying
Ninja
how he's an
Gaiden.
old man now, and
We just talked about that. That's a check right there. We're
straight
talking about
dude.
putting lean in the cup,
Right,
vodka
right,
in the
right.
water bottle,
Something
all
something
the
GameStop. I
OGs.
don't even know if that was even a thing. Like, like did we mention that?
I think
uh,
I don't know, dude. Like I feel like we cover such a vast array of things where I'm sure GameStop's come up at some point.
right, right.
Uh, I don't know. Like my personal opinion is like I've never really liked them as a company. I feel like they treat their employees horrible.
Well, it's
Uh,
retail though.
they're
I think retail by design, it's basically slave labor.
it's gotten worse. I don't know. Like
It's gotten worse. Shit.
I'm extremely biased based on like there's like a YouTube channel where like a guy like who was like a regional manager, he like talks about like all the ins and outs like a little bit deeper than like the first. Like I've never worked for him and like it's all subjective, but like that's kind of all I have to go on.
Yeah.
It's like those subjective like really base like biased reviews of like working for them. But
Right.
it seems like those major retail corporations like they don't want you to unionize, they don't want you to work together,
No.
they want to exploit like their workers as much as possible, like
Did you see the Amazon Union stuff in the news?
they've been
Some
trying like since the start of the pandemic, and I told people
yeah.
like I was like, hey, Amazon's trying to unionize like out in New York, and they're like, fuck those guys, those assholes, like it's a pandemic, they're taking advantage of everybody. I was like, oh yeah, man, like I agree. Like, do you know what they're like going after? And they're like, no, like what do they want? And I'm like, they want like 2 weeks sick time in case they have the actual like
They want a
band.
bathroom break.
Yeah, they want like a
Apparently,
bathroom. They want like a 15-minute bathroom break
apparently it's
because like the
common
bathroom's
to
like third floor
yeah.
above them, so it's like they count the entire time like moving to the bathroom to like go on their break.
It's
Like
very common apparently to just carry a bottle and to pee in the bottle on your shift instead of going to
piss
the
jobs,
bathroom.
boys.
Yeah, and another company, I can't remember
Allegedly,
which
like I
one.
don't know, like
Yeah,
I
said
don't
that's standard
that's like the
practice.
extreme. Like I know Congress was investigating them before the pandemic because like those allegations were good enough for a congressional hearing to like. And like this is how fucked up we are. We had a congressional hearing to have a investigation bureau like look into the allegations.
Yeah,
So it's like I but like it was substantial enough for like Congress to like pick it up, like in America, like Congress to pick it up and be like, let's look deeper into like these allegations. Like they were serious enough for that, and like it's usually like a pretty good burden of proof is needed. Uh,
Yeah.
but like it's hard to tell though, because lately like Congress has been like doing like weird shit where they're like, let's go after social media and like talk to Mark Zuckerberg and like they're looking
Yeah,
for like
it's just
zingers and one like, but like
yeah.
uh
It's a shit show.
yeah, from
Uh,
my basic understanding though, like those Amazon ones seem pretty legitimate of
yeah, yeah.
like hey, let's investigate the or something like 80% more dangerous than a normal warehouse in America.
That's
So like
funny.
like the
I mean,
injury
not funny
rate,
for
like
the workers, but
yeah. But again, like take it with a grain of salt. Like I was listening to like an interview with like the CEO of like the guy who started Jimmy John's, and he was like, when you get to a certain level, all you're doing is fighting off lawsuits. So it's
well,
hard
the
to tell.
dude who
Like
started Jimmy John's does big game hunting, so he's like, no shit, he's fighting off lawsuits. Like, dude just goes to Africa and
everywhere's a
shoots
lawsuit, dude.
elephants,
Everyone's
dude.
hating.
And it's not even hunting. The dude pays this resort where they literally put them in basically a glorified hallway, and it's literally shooting elephants in a barrel. Like this, like that dude's a piece of shit. Like I'm not even like
It's a
this big animal
legitimate
rights dude. It's just like
hobby.
what the
It's a
fuck.
legitimate hobby, okay? And you're going to be
Uh,
fighting off lawsuits because somebody on Twitter doesn't want you shooting an elephant in the hallway, dude. Fuck those guys. They're
uh,
just jelly. They're
oh
jelly that they're
shit,
not making it.
shit. So outside of virtue signaling for the Jimmy John's founder, what else have you been up to, Chip? How's the week going for you, brother?
I've been listening. I've been doing like an audiobook. It's called Supreme Mangus. It's a web novel. It's
Okay.
basically like Edge Lord Harry Potter. If Harry
Yeah,
Potter
you were
was like
you were
a
talking
straight,
about the last couple of pods.
yeah.
Actually, must
If
be
Harry
deep.
Potter was like a psychopath, like uh, I'm still on that. I think like by like episode 1,000, it starts to turn around a little bit. It starts to get a little better.
Yeah.
Uh, other than that, I've been listening to a couple of different audiobooks. Nothing too noteworthy,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Like
Yeah.
uh, you know how that goes, man.
I do. For myself, man, I've just been chilling. I have some time off from work for the next couple of weeks here, so
Yeah, what you been on? What are you up to?
I've been kind of hammering out doing a near daily stream. I think I'll take like Sundays as a real break day off. The other day,
A day of rest.
yeah, the other day, jokingly, I streamed a Math Blaster, which was actually legitimate fun, and it
Math
actually
Blaster's a throwback, dude. Like I feel
it
like if you didn't have fun playing Math Blaster,
yeah.
you just were a child who didn't understand maths, dude. Like
Yeah, dude. It's
back
like
then.
not only was like solving the problems like a just legitimate thing, but the gamification they did for it was just enough to like get that endorphin rush and to keep going. So as far as edutainment titles, it goes probably Oregon Trail, Math Blaster, a very close second. What like Mario Teaches Typing, I think was up there. Oh, you know what? Number one though for sure
They
is
had like
Typing of the Dead. Like any
Typing of the
typing
Dead's
thing,
up there. Yeah, yeah.
for sure, for sure.
They had like Mario keyboard where it was like an
Yeah,
actual
Mario Teaches
keyboard like
Typing.
on the
There's
yeah.
that, and then
No, no, like a piano keyboard, not like a typing
oh
keyboard.
yeah, that's right, They did. The Mario Teaches series was
It
actually kind of
was
robust,
big.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
it really was.
they had
It
all
really
kinds of
was.
stuff. It
Yeah,
was
man.
like whatever dollar value they could like hook everybody in on. Being like, this is education.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
buy this weird MIDI adaptation for like the NES or SNES. Like,
Well, keep in mind the first solo Luigi game was Mario was missing, and that was a educational
it's like
title as well.
history. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
So
like Leonardo da Vinci is missing. What era would this be in?
it's
And
it's
it's
it's,
like a
it's this
multiple
broke
choice
ass
test.
Carmen San Diego.
Yeah,
For sure,
yeah.
for sure.
Everybody was copying where in the world is Carmen San Diego back in the day, dude?
Yeah, Carmen San Diego was, man, dude. Actually, I think that educational games were actually pretty great back in the day. The Carmen San Diego games were fantastic, dude. I learned so much about history and like geographical locations from those games.
I had the rope memorization of like the what is this question equal to what solution? Like I don't have
You
like
didn't
any
get the
recall like deeper.
okay,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah,
I was
my
that
recall's a little
kid.
deeper, for
I'm
sure.
a book of rocks, dude. Like if rocks were books, like
Yeah.
from them Nat Geo like Book of Rocks,
Yep.
that's my memory, dude.
All right.
Where
All
it's
right.
like I kind of remember like the nuance to the rock, but in the end of the at the end of the day, they're all just rocks, you know,
Oh, for sure, man, for sure. I get that. So,
just different shapes and sizes.
yes,
That's where I'm coming at.
for sure, man. You just lit today.
What?
I'm
I'm
messing
just
with you.
talking about rocks, bro.
Yeah, no, dude. No one goes on rocks for 20 minutes, brother.
That was like 3 minutes, dude. But like you're so hyped for what you want to talk about. You're
I
like,
know.
fuck rocks, dude, straight up and down. I'm like, those are
Rocks are
real
fucking
books.
stupid anyway.
Those are real books you can find on Amazon right now. Sponsored today by Nat Geo's Rocks and
Oh, don't
Minerals.
say that. Good God, don't say that. Combo Wombo
Dude.
shut down for saying that they're sponsored when they actually weren't. Nat Geo took us down, dude. It's gonna happen.
Nat Geo will sponsor us, dude. I don't think they'll take us down. I think they're after any sponsorship they could get.
Right.
After we talked about shooting elephants in the
Holy
hallway.
shit, they're like, holy shit, somebody's gonna we gotta sponsor these guys. Oh man. So let's get to the topic at hand today, man. It's something that I was pumped about. So over the last few pods, we talked about arena shooters, we talked about beat 'em ups, fighting games. You know, we've gone through genres, RTSs,
Michael Bay.
the infamous Michael Bay discussion, to our modern mediocre versus
skip over it.
versus 90s and older classics. You know, we
Bad
we
Boys
kind of
2.
we kind of ran the gamut. Bad Boys 2 is amazing.
Michael Bay.
Today, speaking of horrific
I'm
things,
pretty. He directed that, right?
Bad Boys 2, yeah, the Bad Boys series is
Yeah.
his.
Okay.
Yeah. Horror video games.
I'm just saying, like those were really good. And you just said
No,
it
they
was
were.
good,
They
so-
were. They were. Damn, dude. I'm sorry. I got a thought going, man. You just
Oh,
out here in the
sorry,
corner
I'm
going,
sorry, I thought it
Bad
was-
Boys 2. Like, shut the fuck up. Let me talk.
Michael Bay directed Bad Boys 2, and you just said it was a good movie. I'm
It's a
taking
good
a moment
movie,
to
man.
acknowledge that moment. Like, can we just say like that was a good movie?
I said Michael Bay is not overly terrible. Just Ninja Turtles was bad. That's all.
No, like I'm not
The
talking
Rock,
about Ninja
Bad
Turtles.
Boys.
I'm talking about Bad Boys 2. Can you say that's a good movie?
Yeah, it's a good movie.
And Ninja
It's a
Turtles
good
1,
movie. No, I can't say that.
directed by Michael Bay.
No.
No, you just said it, so it's good. No, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
All right, so horror video games. I think it's been apparent that shut up. Horror video games. I think it's
Like
been
succubus, like horrors.
like Resident Evil, like zombies, vampires, ghouls. You know, those types of things.
Things that go bump in the night.
A bump in the night.
Like
ranging from
HORR.
yes,
Not W.
yes.
All right, no, I'm just making sure.
So it's actually one of those things where we mentioned it kind of sparingly in the last couple of pods that making a horror video game is like you can get away with it being lower budget. You can same with making a horror movie.
I think movies. We're more talking about like the movies, but
well, we mentioned it too because it's easier to scare someone just by having like dimly lit things and things popping
like
up.
jump scares. Like there's different levels of scares. Like I feel like the hardest is to get like the deeper universal truth of like psychological scares.
Yeah.
There's like the things that go bump in the night. You might think of like those traditional universal monsters, but they were all based on like deeper French writing, philosophical like treatises of like like Frankenstein, where like Frankenstein, like in the actual book, was like well read and like wrote, and like it was more of like the machine turned man, the Deus Ex Machina of like
Yeah,
of a subject matter. But like, yeah, like so I would say there's like different levels of like horror video games,
yeah,
but like
yeah.
horror as a genre as well. There's like nuance to it.
Oh, sure,
It-
sure. Whether you go back to the Bram Stoker Dracula, the Mary Shelley Frankenstein, where it's either the supernatural or the taking like a person where it's a vampire, twisting it just a little bit where something's not right, and then as
yeah,
far as Frankenstein taking amalgam of body parts and forming a living being outside of it, and actually
that's
that
that.
being not being the monster. That was like one of the earliest examples of the true monster is man. Was
Yeah.
Frankenstein, because Frankenstein
So
wasn't inherently evil. He didn't know what was happening, didn't know his strength. He all he wanted was a friend, and the town just turned on him. I think, and then on that point, I want to jump off to like where horror video games kind of started. Like, I don't think they
yeah,
really hit their stride until I want to say mid '90s with um, definitely Alone in the Dark on the PC, but I feel that's so dated that it's a footnote at this point, because the game I'm about to mention really kicked off everything. It became a worldwide phenomenon. It had a very successful movie series. It's having a TV series on Netflix and a movie reboot later in 2021, and that is, of course,
Resident Evil.
yeah.
Resident Evil. We spoke about a tiny bit on the FMV episode, saying how they used live actors
Yeah.
at the beginning
Speaking of
for a
congressional hearings, like you can make the point that it led to like those like phantasmagoria of like that B film.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
it- and like there definitely was horror like on the NES and all this with like Jason and like uh, Friday the 13th. You
yeah.
had
Super
your
Nintendo had Clock Tower as well with
yeah,
the Scissor Man, which was fantastic, by the way. But it's nothing really. I think that the video game world collectively, especially people our generation and anyone who kind of grew up in that time and gamed, the first time you see that zombie in Resident Evil is ingrained in everyone's mind. Like, it might not be scary now, but that sequence was the perfect introduction to video game horror. And I actually dig the tank controls, because like, yes, people were trying to figure out 3D and how to handle it, but not having smooth movement added to the sense of frustration and fear to try and get away from these slow moving zombies. But you see that zombie on screen, and it's a digital video that's there. The zombie's there. You're like,
yeah.
oh shit, something's happening. You kill him. You go into the next room. You walk by a window, and what happens? Do you remember?
It's like a video transition of like a
Uh,
door, like
well, yeah. But then after that, the zombie dog jumps through the window.
just out of nowhere, like you
Yeah,
get the
yeah,
breaking
yeah.
glass.
And so the
Uh,
jump, so that's one of the things with horror, man. You have the in front of your face horror, but the true horror games that are effective and true horror movies that are effective build tension, and then they build that tension as long as possible until you finally get that sense of release. And that sequence of Resident Evil, from showing the zombie, you knowing that the zombie and you have to look out for, to the false sense of security where you're looking for like a zombie on the other side of this hallway, and the wind glass breaks, a dog jumps in and starts attacking you. So I think that that's such a great example of how to do a jump scare correctly in a
yeah,
in
and
a
like
game
we
without being
talked
cheap.
about like the FMV, and we kind of touched on it with like the Doom remake, where the Doom remake, like right when your guy gets brought into the world, it's like there's been a demon invasion, and
Hmm.
like the creators of the game were like, we want you to buy in from that point to be like, yeah, this is kind of corny and ridiculous, but we want you as a viewer and participator of like this interactive experience to buy in at that moment.
Yeah,
And I feel like for those like OG like 90s like Resident Evil, like they want you to buy in from like the moment, like where it's like Raccoon City, like this is like a thing that's happening, and like a zombie outbreaks happen, and like a special task force has been dispatched to like figure out what's happened, and they're like trapped in this mansion. And like if you're not bought in like already at that point, like you're like it's not going to be for you, and that's okay. But like there's something about like a little bit of buy-in along the way, like a breadcrumb trail of being like, uh, if you're bought in at this point, like you're going to be taken aback by like the first, like, hey, what's going on? The mystery of like these zombies, like, because I think like the first actual zombies like on the ground, like just laying there, and you like you can choose to shoot it like while it's on the ground. You're like, oh shit, that's a fucking zombie. I've
Yep.
seen movies. Or
Yep.
you can be like, I'm gonna step back, like what's going on? Like the zombie
Like,
will like get up
it
and like,
grabs it.
yeah,
Yep.
come at you. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh and then like from there, like that dog scene, there's like a little bit of a disconnect where you have to get a key to a
Yes.
room, and then like open up another key, and then like lock pick another room. Like if you pick Jill Valentine or
The
unlock
master
two
of
other rooms.
unlocking.
Yeah, the master of unlocking.
Yep.
And then like when you get out into that like open stretch where the FMV like kind of showed of like those like zombie dogs chasing you down, like you kind of remember that they're there, but like you kind of already forgot at that point. Of you like you
Especially because games, like a lot of the times before Resident Evil, the videos you saw had nothing to do with the game.
yeah.
It was the games were notorious for having these really fantastical videos, and the game not featuring anything that you've seen in it. So like Capcom like doubled down, like, yep, they're zombie dogs, yep, we're doing it in this engine. So for sure, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought it was,
No, yeah, no, I agree. Like, and like at that point, it's like it like subverts your expectations, but it builds on like you were talking about before all this, where like it builds that like tension, even though you didn't realize like that's what they were doing. It's like a setup of like dogs chasing you, and like gives you like a slight comfort of like you've made it to safety into like a building,
yep,
but like everything's like slightly off, like it's cattywampus, and like and like there's like weird Dutch angles, and you're like there's more going on here that meets the eye.
yes,
And then like right when you like get involved in the mystery of this mansion, all of a sudden it pulls you back to like the real threat of like zombie dogs chasing you down, and like it crashes through windows, like so it builds up that tension
yes,
by making you almost forget about like the primary chasing motivation, but
yeah.
like you bought in at that point, you know.
Yeah, and where and I feel like this, like when we're talking about storytelling, video games and things, like movies and video games are such close cousins, because they both of these mediums had to learn how to convey stories differently, because you're interacting with a new medium, because books have been established for freaking hundreds, thousands of years before movies, um so to show, like, you can't really convey a thought like someone thinking in a movie typically, without like a narrating voiceover, but there's other ways to do it. And in gaming, you could do it like a book, you can do it like a movie, you can do it through player action as well, through leading
Yeah.
them on with breadcrumbs. It's so like that's why I think I have such nostalgic love for the late 80s, early to mid 90s of gaming, because it was, everything was new, everything that you were trying to figure out was new. There is seldom times in most generations of living where you get an entirely new platform to really just kind of sink in and see the growing pains, like I'd say like our parents generation kind of had, or slightly before that is TV, right? The evolution of television.
Yeah.
Went from black and white, went from radio to actually
Well,
seeing
from like
things.
yeah, like no
Yeah,
sound, like it went to like from no sound, you had your
yeah,
talkies with radio, and then like yeah, like the
yep,
combination of the two, and like those early TV, it's like 3 or 4 channels, and it's 100% live, so it's almost like it's basically podcasting, where it's people like reading from like a
yes,
teleprompter, and then it goes to like like Superman and like
yep,
serial lies, like stories of
yep,
like reading scripts of like, hey, this is like powered by your imagination, but it's really built for radio, but like we're not sure how to
do
film
it
it
yet.
yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So great point. And why Resident Evil works so well is because at its heart, it's a B movie. It is a Saturday night drive-in movie. As a game that you're playing through. It takes itself super serious, but
yeah.
it is also intentionally campy. And some people will argue that it's not intentionally campy, that it was just bad writing, things like that. I disagree, because the sequels kind of prove that uh it's the campiness is ingrained in it, because inherently zombies taking over the city, and the overarching umbrella corporation that's like this faceless evil entity is very cliche, but Resident Evil does it in such a popcorn fun way that you can't help but be engrossed in it. Um, and then from Resident Evil, you had everyone goes, oh crap, let's all make horror games. You had what, Nightmare Creatures. Uh, wow, I can't even. I just drew a blank because,
There's
but
a lot. There's like a weird like you have Capcom like copying off their own system with like Dino Crisis,
yes,
uh,
same engine.
where they're like trying to just kind of figure it out. You have like Phantasmagoria. You have like a lot of
Right.
like FMV like
Phantasmagoria,
like
Seventh
B
Guest,
film.
Sanitarium, yeah.
Yeah,
So I think the only, like, I'll give Dino Crisis a footnote, just because I mean Capcom made it; it was in the same engine. I
it's a
think
good
that
game.
Dino Crisis really,
1 and 2.
yeah, was definitely a decent offshoot. But the other series that really
9 out of 10.
actually solidified itself as a true Resident Evil competitor was Silent Hill, right?
Yeah,
Silent Hill tackled things completely differently from Resident Evil. While Resident Evil was pure jump scares, Silent Hill was quiet, subdued, psychological horror.
it had the
And
better movie adaptation as well.
yes, it did. Yes, it did. Less
That's a
successful,
banger.
but also I think with its style of horror, it will always be less successful in terms of it, because masses go to these teen slasher movies, right? The dark, haunting, slow paced movies, like the uh, oh man, like the Devil Inside, or well, that's a terrible one, but
Scary
something else,
movie.
like people will see Friday the 13th before they see something like the Babadook, you know. um it's just the
I
nature of the
don't
beast.
necessarily feel that. I feel like Babadook and like those type of films are like if you're like turning like a legal age to watch more scary movies, like you might be going to the cinema to see that. Maybe it's a little bit different with like the interwebs, like having
Mm,
access to everything.
yeah,
So I think like whatever like the latest like
i'm talking
horror
i'm talking just
horror
real
genre.
general public, because like the Paranormal Activity movies, Saw, like these not deep, just popcorn, gore thrill rides. That's what Resident Evil is, and that's what Resident Evil caters to, and it's not a bad thing. um
I think
it
there's like 5 of those movies.
For the
Like
Resident Evil movies, it's like
yeah,
yeah, something like that, with
five,
Mila
six, seven,
Jovovich.
eight.
Yeah, so
They just had
it's
the Monster Hunter movie.
yep,
Did you
yep.
watch
So
that?
no, I didn't.
I have not either. My buddy told me that it has nothing to do with actual like Monster Hunter story. So
Yeah, yeah, that's, I mean, it's a Paul W.S. Anderson thing. He just puts his wife in something and goes. But yeah, so I think that with Silent Hill, it delved into the psychological more, and and that led to just like this subset of survival horror fans, people who wanted the loud action of Resident Evil, and Resident Evil started to lean into it more. Post Code Veronica, you had Resident Evil 4 with the slap the camera behind your shoulder. It was more of an action game, but Resident Evil 4 struck that balance between action and survival horror still. There still wasn't as much ammo as you could to be a full action game. The limb based damage made you actually aim proper. When you
Yeah.
were out of ammo or anything else, you had to actually run in melee, so you had to get it up into the grill of some maniac with a chainsaw. So you
I
didn't want
felt
your head chopped off. So
they hit that perfection at like Resident Evil 4 for me
yeah,
personally. Where like I played a ton of like Resident Evil 4.
yeah,
But like that limb action, like they just hit it right where like you could take out like the legs of somebody like coming at you and like it felt empowering in a weird way
yeah,
because like those early Resident Evil games, like 1 through 3, were like about like ammo management and threat
yes,
management. And like they didn't really necessarily have like the hit boxes that would come in like by 4. It
yep,
was like a little bit by 3 and like kind of with 2. But like 1 and 2 you really couldn't aim. It was just like that's tank controls and like your center mass
yep,
locking in on targets. But like when you could actually like start to target like specific uh pieces on a like zombie and prioritize your targets, like it almost became like a threat management simulator, and
yes.
it felt a lot more real. Like the Resident
So
Evil series is like the only video game that's ever given me like a nightmare.
yeah,
Like it
yeah, that's a lot of people,
yeah,
man. Yeah,
yeah.
I think so. My favorite Resident Evil is Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, because um, the omnipresent threat of the Nemesis chasing you, and the fact that if you've played like Resident Evil 1 and 2, if you switch screens, you were safe. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, you switch screens, he can switch screens with you and continue to chase you. And that is what enabled a ton of fear in the game. The game was very short, but you heard like stomping, you heard that just ominous stars, just in the corner, it would just like rumble. Like I always had like surround sound my entire life, so I remember just I played that game in the dark, with the surround sound cranked. I remember walking through the police station. I was in the police station for way too long because I couldn't figure out this puzzle. And right when I was like, okay, all right, he's not coming back, I just hear that stars, and that's all it was. I remember just like hearing the rumble of the bass and the surround sound. Just like I had to pause it and get up and like get some water or something, man, just to the tension. And that's like Resident Evil tension building was is second to none. That being said, let's talk about Silent Hill a little bit. Are you familiar with the game series? I know you've seen the movie.
Uh, Barely. Like I played a little bit of one, I want to say, but like I've never really been huge on like scary games or
Mm,
movies, like personally.
yeah,
Uh
yeah,
like like I said, like Resident Evil 1 gave me nightmares, and I'm like, fuck this, I don't need all this. Which is a little bit hypocritical because I was like talking about like how art is supposed to make you feel different things, and like that's okay. Uh and like being scared's okay, but like it's not like my go-to like emotion where I'm like, I like to feel
yeah.
like everything could get like flipped upside down. You know?
I love horror movies. I love horror games. My thing is it's like that adrenaline seeking thing. There, if something truly scares you, or it gets like you could feel it, you could feel it in your chest. You feel like a heightened sense of adrenaline. Here, I chase that feeling. That it's fantastic, and I haven't like really watched a horror movie in some time that actually gave that feeling to me,
To
but I
me,
enjoyed dark stories like that too. So, and I know that at some point if it's done well, I will get that feeling.
yeah, for me, like that feeling comes from science fiction, like Tales from the Crypt. Like I feel like that's more science fiction, like The Outer Limits. And I
Yeah,
know like a lot of people
outer
would
limits
like
for sure.
classify that more as horror. To me, like that always seemed like more sci-fi, like exploring like uh surreal possibilities of like objective reality or subjective reality, like of where you can like take an idea, like even like for like stories that like for audiobooks or like that I'll read or go to, like I like the idea of like something that could be based on like uh real world or real world consequences, or like playing with like the pliable nature of like reality, where it's like you can like look into the future, or like you can like take things from the future into the past, or you're like a special power, or like a and like how would uh people react to that, and like much like was it like the Snyder DC universe where he's taking like the DC characters, like what if this was gritty and real, like Nolan North Batman. uh
Yeah, Christopher Nolan's but yeah,
yeah,
yeah, true, true. It's like no, yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. I think that um, not to take that away, but Silent Hill, what it did was there's combat in Silent Hill, but that's definitely not the focus. The
I'm just
focus
saying they're
is
kissing cousins,
yes, yes.
like
The
horror
the
and sci-fi.
yeah, yeah. Oh, definitely, definitely,
They're
because
like two cousins who
they're
like
both the fear
were
of the
making
unknown.
out.
Basically, the sci-fi is like figuring out the unknown. Horror is fear of the unknown, right? Like
Yeah, it's like that Cthulhu, like your mind can't comprehend the
yes,
shadows
yes,
and darkness that lie
yep,
within.
yep,
It's
yep.
like you staring at the abyss, and the abyss staring back at you.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Silent Hill that they did the team Silent did better than Capcom did at Resident Evil was sound design. Like the heavy metal, orchestral like music, the air raid siren for when the other world is taking over. Um, like I know you're not too familiar, but like the movie, you can kind of get what I'm going with. And the game was just steeped in metaphor for what it is actually about. Like Silent Hill 2, most people consider the pinnacle of that series, with Pyramid Head, which I think he was just called Red Pyramid. There, I think like the fans just dubbed him Pyramid Head. He was representative of like sexual frustration from the main character. That's and like guilt from it, and that's subject matter that games don't touch on. Games before Silent Hill 2, no game touched on anything remotely close to that. So the horror genre gets these bigger talks um, onto the forefront. And then with Silent Hill kind of paving the way for that, you have games like Spec Ops: The Line that deals with like committed like depression. Uh, uh, um, what's the combat thing? I'm trying to think of it. It's like shell shock or like the uh, what's that PTSD. Um, Spec Ops: The Line deals with that. Hellblade, Senya's Sacrifice. That I think maybe that's the second game's title, but that game is just deals with mental illness with a horror themed like setting. I think that to have bigger conversations in gaming and to experience things that you probably won't experience in your everyday life, horror is the gateway to that. It opens up new things. It opens up new conversations, and we owe Resident Evil, we owe Silent Hill just a debt a debt of that we should be grateful for opening up these avenues to express things. Horror isn't just about being scared or scaring other people. It's especially in the Eastern horror, it's figuring out a mystery. Like all of the Eastern horror movies, you're basically figuring out why someone died, why they died a violent death, what you can do to help them. That's the same thing with the games, man. You're at the end of the day figuring out a problem, and I think
Yeah.
that the
Well, like you're saying, like it goes to that deeper problem of like you're tackling like that deeper problem of like an emotional state, and like taking that apart to
yeah.
um like you're saying, like you know was it like Castlevania to like what
Mhm.
makes a man, almost of like you're taking like a
What is a
that like
man?
yeah,
Yeah.
what is a man, like you're taking apart like that part of like a person where it's like what what makes this person sad, or like depressed, or
Mhm.
lonely, or like makes you feel alone, like traveling through like the darkness, or like stripping away like community, or like all the other things to explore like those feelings in like an interactive environment. And
Yep.
there's definitely like a deeper feeling that it touches on than like I think like a lot of like any other genre.
Yeah.
Like I said, like the kissing cousin of it is like sci-fi, where like that also kind of tries to explore like ideas, but it almost takes like the half step of saying like, hey, I'll give you like community or society or like uh but like we'll explore it like in a half-hearted attempt by being like they're alien though, or like they're it's sci-fi, whereas like horror takes it and, and it's like no, you're alone, you're by yourself, or it's like or it's zombies or it's demons or it's monsters, and like the deeper construct of like whatever that means,
Mhm.
like I've heard like zombies traditionally represent like societal norms. So it's like this movie like Train to Busan, I think it's
Train
called. It's
Busan,
like
yeah. Yep.
yeah, it's Korean.
Yep.
And like if you watch that film, like every time like somebody steps into like what society thinks they should be doing, like that's the part where they get pulled into being a zombie.
Yeah.
Uh
Yeah.
so
Well,
they,
like Dawn of the Dead was just anti-consumerism. That's why they went to the
yeah.
mall. So it makes sense. It's horror is always used as a metaphor for a bigger picture, and I think that horror fans know that, and people who don't necessarily play horror video games and just think that like some of the stuff's just schlock or just depraved, they're missing out on a whole world of just concepts and bigger discussions around it. That being said, there's been a trend in indie horror to not have any combat, which
It's mostly gone to like jump scares, which is kind of like
it's
the easier
it's jump scares and sneaking. Yeah, and you're right. It's
yeah.
when done well, it can be good. Like the original Outlast game, I thought did it well. I thought Amnesia, the first Amnesia, did it well also. But there's so many clones and so many like cookie cutter, just like Unity made projects where you don't let the enemy see you, that just grinds my gears a little bit, because they're they're just trying to cash in on something someone else did. And I think that avoiding combat is a real cop out from a game developer's standpoint, because if you design the game around it, sure, but when everyone else is doing it, I feel like you're not growing as a developer if you don't have combat in the game,
You're
right?
just trying to make money, bro. Who cares
Yeah.
about growing as a developer? Like, I don't know. Like, it feels like they have like the same problem for any genre almost, where it's like there's a million clones of like whatever you're trying to do, and people trying to like emulate that. Like,
Yeah.
you even see it for like old school stuff now, where like a lot of people are like, I'm just gonna make like Doom. Remember Doom? Maybe you want a first person shooter like Doom. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like horror, there's definitely a lot of asset flip games where it's like they're literally not doing anything to tell their own story.
Yep.
Uh, I know there's been like a lot of like text based like adventure game almost,
Yep.
which is kind of like the other thing like we didn't really touch on is like horror is more of a theme, and like the genre like can be like anything. So like I know like there's like horror like text adventure games, there's like action adventure, there's you know choose your own adventure almost, where it's like
Yes.
like a story based beat. There's like a first person shooters with your Resident Evil or whatever, but like yeah, horror is more of like a generalization, not a specific genre, if that makes sense to like people. Like it's more of a theme than a genre, whereas like a genre it feels like a game type, whereas a theme is like how that game makes you feel.
I think that it initially started off as a genre, like survival horror was it, right?
Yeah,
Like games
like
with like
Capcom
resource
like is the
management
only
and
one
like
doing it. That they're
yeah, yeah,
they made it. They made that genre.
true, true. Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I think that I think that the horror the horror subset of games is in it's in a good space, but it's also in like the dangerous space of like when VHS kind of first rose to prominence, or like 8 millimeter film, where anyone and their mom could make a horror movie, right? So then you had floods of just terrible things, just terrible. Like Five Nights at Freddy's, I'll use it as an example. It's just pure jump
Oh, like a
scares,
good game?
and no, as like what I'm talking about.
What?
I think I don't
I
think Five
I will
Nights at
say that they were doing jump scares
before.
in yeah. I would
Yeah,
say like they kind of modernized it.
they did, and they it was the perfect timing for the YouTube and Twitch crowd. I don't hate
Yeah.
it. I don't hate it. It's just the games I find kind of lazy. I think that using the animatronic
I think
like
it's only
motion capture
lazy
things are is
now
cool.
considering all the derivative stuff you're saying that came from it.
Yes,
Where it's like
yes.
it's easy to dunk on now because it did something that nobody else was doing where it was like almost like that feel of like a lost footage or lost
Yep.
because I know like now there's like people specifically targeting like a PlayStation 1 style game. And
Yep.
they're like, I found this PlayStation 1 game, and they'll make like a YouTube video and they'll be like, I don't know what's happening. My guy's like soul's getting stolen. And that was the last video where, like on their YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's like people like trying to like make almost like mockumentaries of like that style of like nostalgic throwback of like found footage, but it's like a found video game
Yeah.
type of game now. And I
Yeah.
feel like Five Nights at Freddy was like the first take at it, so it's easy to be like, man, fuck them. They're like doing like something basic.
No, and
It's but like I think it was much uh like that FMV style, like a video game where it's like they did something that like hit on like you shouldn't be seeing this. Like the Blair Witch Project's kind of like the example I'm gonna
yeah.
go with. Where like when that came out, like people are like, this is like found footage, it's like a VHS tape, like
Yep.
this is legitimate footage. And like you watch it and like people are like, what the fuck? People were like legitimately calling the cops and stuff like, oh, I think
Yep.
I know, blah blah blah. And I think like Five Nights at Freddy hit like that exact same style of zeitgeist of like this is like a found video game, like you're not supposed to be seeing it. It seems like something you may have seen, or like it seems like maybe it's supposed to be like one of these like arbitrary, like generic Chuck E. Cheese style games that maybe got
Yep.
released on like a
Yep.
Pizza Hut DVD that like you collected, but like it's not supposed to be. And I feel like it hit like that for a generation of people.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, and I didn't mean to come across as like hating on it. I just think that from that you just have like from the popularity of Five Nights at Freddy's, from the popularity of Outlast and Amnesia, you just have this subset of clones where it's just lazy.
yeah,
And so it's hard to look at a horror game and get excited for it, because I feel like for myself as a fan of the medium of the style of game and of horror in general, I get burned quite a bit by the
yeah.
game just not living up to actually being a game. A lot of time it's a walking simulator with like spooky sounds. Some
Or
games
like
that are
even like movie, like that whole theme and genre like has been pretty exploitive to the fan base. Like
Mhm.
uh you could even go back to like literature where there's like a whole subsect of like everybody trying to be like Stephen King. Like they're just
Yes,
like throwing
yes.
out like they're like, oh, I want to be like HP Lovecraft or Stephen King, and I'm gonna write my derivative story based on like one of their stories. Uh so
Yeah.
like this has been going on for a while, and I will almost I'll put like a light defense on it where there's like I've talked about before where it's like Isekai like travel to a new world genre
Yes.
was kind of spawned by like Sword Art Online for like the animated series
Sure.
because it's like a great writing prompt where like it's like, hey, you've been transported into a video game and like now it's for real. And you're like, oh fuck, I could write a lot about like that from like any different
Yeah.
angle.
Yeah.
So it kind of like inspired like a whole level, like a new series, a new genre for writers in Japan, or like web novelists who are like, I want to write about like reincarnation in a video game, or like if you die you get taken to a new world. And I feel like horror was like the old school isekai, where it's like uh all of us have like those universal feelings of like being scared or out of control, or like slowly losing grip on reality, or like things becoming slowly more insane, as you know.
Yeah.
uh so those are great writing prompts. uh and so like that's, they again give him the benefit of the doubt, that's where like all that derivative generic bullshit comes from, whereas people being inspired by, but like there's like a thin line of being like inspired by and just like ripping off.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of people are doing like the cover band version of a lot of like great sci-fi or horror themes and tropes
Yeah.
uh out there. uh and like that's what you see with, especially right now, where you're saying where it's like not necessarily as a negative, but a lot of people like making like an Unreal or a Unity game because they can get the engine for free, and they're like, oh, let me just asset flip, or like do like the most bare bone generic thing, and I'm not necessarily even inspired by. There's not a good story.
They're
There's
just
just like,
looking for
just
cash.
hopefully I can trick somebody. I'm
Yeah,
gonna be like the Sharknado.
the worst part of being a fan of horror and also just living in this time is Twitch culture and Halloween. So there's always like this $3 to $6 game, you know, or $3 to $15 game. I'll even bring it up that seems to become like the it game to play. I think we got lucky this year because, or this year, like previous year because of Phasmophobia. It's a single dev made game. It's ghost hunting, and it has a unique hook where the ghost hears you talk. So like you're talking to your buddies or whatever, and the ghost will like and especially if you have like headphones on or like you know directional audio, the ghost can whisper behind you like death, you know, and like stuff like that, and then like appear behind you and like a lot of the things that Phasmophobia did, and it's multiplayer, so it's a team of four going into these haunted areas trying to figure out the mystery of what type of ghost it is. Um, I got burnt out pretty quickly because uh, it's one of those things where it's a single dev, but this guy is putting so much into it where I give him nothing but props. But my own like gaming sensibilities where it didn't work was the death animation is just ghost reaching out and grabbing your face and like pulling you away or like just in your face or whatever and just making a blah, you know. um it was just those two, and that doesn't scare me, you know. But it's hard to scare someone who's always looking to be scared, you know what I mean. It's like
What's like a scary theme for you? Like if you could put it into like if like a deeper theme.
what
Like
would actually scare me.
yeah, like for me, like I'll go kind of first.
Okay.
For me, it's like a sense of like helplessness, like not being able to do anything. Where it's like, you know, like the continually falling, or like
Mm.
reaching out, or like nobody being able to see you type of thing, where like you're like the sense of invisibility, or like constantly falling, like yeah, like that general sense of like helplessness is like the deepest
Oh,
level of like
you're talking in life like a
yeah,
full
like
real life
life,
thing.
bro,
Okay.
like
Okay.
deep. Like
Okay.
what's the like what, because like for me, like for most video games or like movies and stuff, like just the sense of control uh with a controller
Yeah.
like rules out like a lot of like that sense of helplessness.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me, like I always have like the most awkward like in Metal Gear Solid 1, where it's like praying mantis takes control from you, and like everything's opposite controls or whatever. You're
Yeah.
like, what the fucking shit, like that's legitimately scary, where it's like it's where you're losing literal control of like a game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good one. For me, I think it's more uh lately it's been more of the unnatural things, like I don't want to say like more of the cosmic horror stuff where it's like an unfathomable horror, but it's something where you take like an everyday thing and you tweak it just slightly where it looks off and you can't
Yeah.
shake that feeling. A good one is there's like a story going around online about the smiling man, right? Where he's just has this big just smile, and
Yeah.
nothing, and then something is just off about him, like the smile never stops, things like that. Even in the dark, you can see him smiling, or you can just see like
Yeah.
the teeth, like something like that, where it's just like so unsettling. um that is what would get me, because that unknown thing, like I'm not a person who's like afraid of the dark or anything, but if I flip the lights off and you see like a shadowy figure that looks slightly human but just tilted a little bit,
Isn't
would be
everybody
enough to
like
do it.
I feel like that's like a universal thing where like people go to bed and like the shadows are humanoid enough. Like I want to say like it's like a legitimate like your mind's like made to
Like
build
makes
like
it makes
patterns
it,
on
yeah, it looks at
yeah, or
patterns, you're
like
right.
for like faces or like people. Like
Yeah.
our minds are designed to like see like those shapes. So like it's like you'll be looking at like the shadows or like a curtain or something. You're like, oh, I see a person or I see like a face or
Yeah, see
uh
that, like in life that doesn't happen to me, really, but just if I think about it a lot, I'm like, yeah, that's actually scary. Like if I were to make a horror game, it would be something like that, where like my thought is to have like a family, and you're just doing like mundane things, right? You're taking care of like your kids, you're like taking like your parents to like the store or something like that. And then just like there's just these little tiny things that are off, whether it's something like let's say you take a grandma to the store, she's like scratching her head every now and then, and like she gets deeper and deeper in until she's like her hands inside of her head and there's blood coming out, and doesn't mention anything. You come out, you come back, you help her load groceries in, and then just like skin starts sloughing off, and then she doesn't mention anything. She's slowly coming in, and then just and then she goes, can you check something out for me, and then just that like kind of body horror element will go, and each family member will have a different like ailment, or something that's wrong, like
just slightly off, but you know,
yeah.
just beyond the pale of like what normally would be
Yes,
happening.
yes, yes. So that's the harder horror to convey, but that's
Yeah, like
I
we
think
were
works
trying to
best.
touch on like is like jump scares are like the lazy slash easy thing to convey. It was like rah,
Yeah, yeah. No, I
you
like
know.
jump scares though. I like them. I like that, but you
To
don't
me, like
always
it
want
does
that.
nothing.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I think it's fun. I think it's fun to
to
get
me, it's
for a jump scare.
funny.
It's like yeah, it's fun. People will laugh at that, like, oh, that scared you. Jump scares are like a roller coaster. That's all it is. Sometimes I like roller coasters. That's I sometimes I look for jump scares.
No, I'm kind of with you with like kind of like I kind of touched on with like the outer limits. I felt kind of touches on that like uh sense of like something just being slightly off or like I feel like it does a better job of like portraying like a lot more psychological horror.
Yeah,
But it's like sci-fi where it's like the newer one is like there's like an episode where like somebody's getting pulled over and like they have like a they're like recording like their kid going to college and like as they're recording like they get pulled over and like like the cop ends up like shooting the kid and then like the mom like rewinds the tape because she's like sad
yeah,
afterwards
yeah,
and like it brings back time and like she's like oh fuck now she's like trying to change time by like recording it and like she's recording like they like avoid the problem but then like years later like like after a series of like the same problem happening of like
yeah,
the cops showing up and killing her kid like she like figures out like a way out of it and then like it goes like years later where like the camera breaks and like all of a sudden like the cops like right there at the front door like hey what's up this is inevitable like you've just been putting it off you
yeah,
know
yeah,
where it's like that weird like sense of like losing control and but like believable but like slightly off like
Yep. Yep.
Those are like the best. And like I think like Stanley Parable, like for a video game,
Yeah.
is like kind of good at that.
Yeah.
Where it's not, I wouldn't classify it as like a horror genre, but it's kind of like horror, you know, where
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I you know,
That game also like messes with you in real life because there's that achievement where don't play this game for 5 years and then play it. You know, it's like so the game is playing you. You know,
yeah,
like you bought the game. If you're an achievement hunter, you got to wait the 5 years. I'm pretty sure there's a way to spam it, but cheese it. But let's say you don't. Like I got that Stanley Parable 5-year achievement just the other day. Actually, I had a Google Calendar notification going, "Hey, it's been 5 years. Get that achievement." So, but yeah, that's a great point. To put a pin on it, I think that what I really wanted to showcase with this episode is that whether you like horror games or not, they have a place. It elevated storytelling. The majority of them go for a true emotional response, and then further discussion and things that are typically not discussed publicly, such as mental illness or things like that. And I think that if you're
just
willing
unsettling you.
if
Just
you're
making you
willing
unsettled.
to go for the ride, that you can find some really solid gems. Uh, Resident Evil Village will be out the week after this episode launches. Resident Evil's going in a different direction now. They have Lady Dimitrescu, who's like a 7 foot tall vampire. They have werewolves. They have witches. I don't know what's happening, but it sounds like they're trying to evoke a different level of response for like fear. So Capcom is always iterating on Resident Evil, and I think they will do gangbusters. So look out for that game for sure. As far as a horror game, I would recommend. As far as recently, I would say it's not true horror, but there was this adventure game that was recommended to me by a mutual friend, Poison, called Dropsy, where you play as a clown who only wants hugs. That game had one of the most subversive, like unsettling stories of just a clown wanting to, do the best for his town, and just to like help the family circus. I don't want to spoil it, but I would definitely say it's not like overtly scary, but it's definitely unsettling. And it was such a fantastic game. I beat it in one sitting. Point and click adventure game, Dropsy. Um, anything that you'd say like, hey, check this out? I know you're not a big horror guy. If not, that's fine. I'm just
I can't even think
curious.
of the name of it. It's like a newer game. It's retro. Uh, it's like you play with like a square and like you have to like navigate like inside the square and like dodge patterns. It's an RPG. My
Under
God.
Not Undertale, right?
Undertales,
Is it
yes.
Undertale?
Yeah,
Okay,
Undertales.
okay, yeah, yeah,
Fuck. I would say Undertales.
yeah.
Where like that game will fuck with you psychologically.
That's
Uh,
that's
it's
very
a
solid.
newer
Yeah,
slash older game. I
yeah.
feel like it falls in the horror genre
I feel it's like
of
if it was released post to 2010, right? Like it still counts as newer because I think that horror goes in these
when did this
iterations
come
where
out? Let me look it up.
big ones. I feel Undertale came out in 14,
2015, yeah, it's pretty
2015.
close.
Okay,
It's,
that's close. Yeah. Yeah.
6 years ago.
When
If you
did
want like a scarier.
when did Dropsy come out?
Uh,
Dropsy. Published by Devolver Digital. Just curious. We can edit this down.
no idea. It did not show up on my Google search results.
Okay.
2015, also September.
Okay, well there it
Wow.
is.
Whoa.
There it is.
So
Yeah, check out this-
2015, Betty, best horror indie game dev drops.
Yeah, and I will
You got
say
your
that
Undertales, you got your Drop C.
I will say that I'm recommending that mine because it's not your traditional style of horror game. Because typically people will go, oh yeah, these 3D ones that are spooky like Outlast 2 stuff, something like that. No, I wanted to, or Evil Within, things like that. Yes, they're all, you know, they're all bigger releases, but I think that these smaller indie releases can really evoke a different response from you. So I hope if
Yeah.
honestly, if one
Like
person checks out either game, I feel excited.
Yeah, like I think you can't really go wrong with either one. But like we're kind of saying, where it's like a lot of games will go for like the jump scare, and like both those games will uh make you unsettled as a person. So like if you're looking for like that horror genre of like I want to be moved to the core, like emotionally, like what the overall arching theme of that is to make you feel like I think like both those games, like if you play them to completion, they'll give you that like slightly unsettling feeling of like, yeah, I beat this, but like at what cost?
The final boss fight in Undertale is amazing. I actually kind of want to play that again, by the way. Just you
Yeah.
mentioning it, it's fantastic. But yeah, guys. So
I can't believe I couldn't think of the name of Undertale.
it happens, man.
I was
Sometimes
like,
when
it's
you get the
fucking.
pod going,
I was so hyped to like think of it, like it like started like pushing it further back. I was like,
yeah,
fuck. I like that remix of the song, and the guy shit.
yeah. The other one I thought when you mentioned like a block is Thomas Was Alone, where
Okay, yeah.
you play as like a literal like a rectangle, you play as a
Yeah.
square, stuff like that. Like that one was another one that kind of touched on a little bit of isolation, which
Yeah, it's
for
like
a lot of people
sci-fi and like
isolation is horror.
yeah, for me, like I kind of talked on that where it's like that unsettling
Mm-hmm.
feeling of like, Thomas Malone's like definitely up there with like deeper psychologically, like where it takes something simple, like got like the other one where it's like there's like a whole, it's like a cat, like I'm gonna start like, it's like you have like a cat, like it's like a clever name. It's almost like Portal, and you have like
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
You'll
gonna.
7 or 8 people know what I'm talking about. I'll have it
Okay.
next week.
Sure.
But there's
So good.
definitely like a game like that where it's like 3D and it's like it's set up almost like Portal, and like Portal you
Sure.
could also say is like a horror game where it's like a mastermind, like sentient like AI gone
Planos,
rogue.
yeah.
Yeah, where it's like I'm trying to kill you, but it's not out of malice.
Yeah, and one of
Type
the
thing.
things I think too is a lot of the big AAA releases have elements of horror in there. Like if we go back to let's say 2001 with the original Halo, the flood levels, like it just became like
Yeah.
a zombie shooter. Gears of War, the whole uh, man, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of the enemies.
Gears of War, the Hive.
Yeah, the Hive. But what are the like grubs called? Like the actual name for them? Do you remember?
Oh,
Locust.
I mean
Locust.
that whole game, the Locust, like that whole game
Yeah,
was like a horror.
yeah,
Like you could even go with like uh Devil May Cry. You could go with like
Oh yeah, well that was just Resident Evil.
Darksiders, where it's like it takes like a deeper theme of like the apocalypse happening and like the world ending. But like we kind of take it for granted because we're like, oh, we play a lot of video games, but it's
Yeah,
like this horrific theme of like the entire world's ended, like one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse
yeah.
comes down, but it was like also kind of some fuckery from like the tribunal, like
Chevrolet. Yep.
yeah, and they're like, yeah, it's just kidding, but also like we also did this because we're after our own power.
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
but
So yeah, I point being that if you've never
Independence Day
played
4 with Will Smith is a great movie.
ID4,
That's
yeah,
ID4 is what this was all about.
yeah.
That's what the
Watch it.
point being is watch Independence Day
Yeah,
with
but
Will Smith.
just like if you don't think that
Don't play the
if you
video
think you don't
game.
Yeah, the video game. Actually, the video game was okay. I liked
No,
it as
it
a kid
wasn't.
on the PlayStation.
Hmm,
I like it. Okay,
not
maybe
really.
I should try it again. It's probably terrible.
It
But
is terrible.
yeah. If you
You're a
think you don't like
child.
horror, you've played. A lot of the big games you've played have elements of it, and I think that if you just kind of grasp that, you'll open yourself up to a whole new world. But yeah, Chip, I think that ends the pod today, man. I think we had some
Yeah.
real in-depth discussion. I know that you're a little wary of the topic, but I think we got it done, man.
Yeah, like I said, like I kind of on the outskirts, but I've always been a fan of it. Much like you touched on like a whole new world. Like if people have said like that Aladdin Disney movie is like a post-apocalyptic wasteland where it's based 2,000 years in the future, and that's why there's references back to
Yeah.
everything that's going on. And
Yep.
I know like that one newer animation is actually like a post-apocalyptic. What's
Raya, the
it
Last
with the
Dragon, because the world ends on that,
no,
or Wally,
no, like a lot of post-apocalyptic children films are out there. Like you just didn't realize it. I
Coraline,
think that I think that's where we'll end.
Nine. Yeah. Okay, we'll end it here.
No,
But
where it's like Adventure Time. Adventure Time's
oh
like a
yeah.
post-apocalyptic
Yep.
world.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like
Yep.
an AI is taking over, and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
but
That's
also a
true.
lot of children's films that you weren't even thinking about.
Just listed some off the top of my head for sure. All right, guys. Well, that is
Ooh,
that is the end of
spectacular.
the Combo
podcast.
Wombo Spooktacular. Yeah, yeah. And the reason why we're doing horror today, and Chip, I don't even think you know this, is because we are officially halfway to Halloween, my favorite holiday. So yeah, here we go.
There we go. Let's get it.
Let's go. All right,
Big times.
for Chip Monk, I'm Mr. Gimpy. This has been the Combo Wombo.